this is up there among the top 3 teachings from the Baal Shem Tov. The other 2 being the submission, separation, sweetening, and another one that almost is not talked about. It's what he calls the Yichud Ira Nora, or the unification of awe and the experience of something being awful. Like unifying the experience and the subjective and the objective.
Of awe and something being full of awe?
No.
And experiencing awe. Ira Nora. Ira is like to feel like what Yaakov felt, that this is an awe-inspiring place, and that it was, it is full of awe. So that unification is like the answer to Kant. It's a big deal. Like Kant was the beginning of.
He said okay.
Good. Okay.
This is one of the 3 most important teachers.
So this one, so we'll say in one word. This one is called Gavhut Shiflut, or superiority and lowliness. And feeling superior and feeling lowly. Remember, we said that feeling lowly means that a person feels that there's no one who's more distant from Hashem than he is. But it's to feel that I'm not much of a find, right? I have all my problems. To feel superior is obviously the opposite, that I feel I'm the most distinguished, the most important, special, and so on. Okay, so let's see what he says. Gavhut. We call it sometimes pride, but really it's stronger. It's in the sense of that I feel that I'm distinguished. I feel that I'm remarkable.
Like Gavora, from Gavora, not from Gaiva.
From Gavoa, right? From high. Okay, Gavut.
Gavut, like Gaiva, from Gaiva.
No, Gava is something else. Gava is not from Gavoa. Gava is from Gimel Aleph Hey. Ga'a is to rise up.
So
It's similar, but it's...
So what's the word? How do you spell it?
Gavhut. We'll see it. I put it in the sheet. So
In
we'll see.
Hebrew?
Yeah.
Where?
Well, you'll see in a moment. You'll see in a moment. Okay, you'll see. So it's because we missed last week, so I have to go back to Chukat because I couldn't miss this one. It's just too important. So that was the introduction. So we're going back to Chukat, even though we already read the parsha. So he says, "Speak to the children of Israel, and they shall bring to you a completely red heifer." And the beginning of the parsha is not about what you do with the heifer; it's rather how to prepare it. And that's really where the question is, about the preparation of the heifer.
That's what question is.
As we'll see, the question that was asked was about the preparation of the heifer, not about how to use it. Afterwards, you use it to purify somebody who came in touch with somebody who's dead, or some other source of impurity. So he writes like this: "It is known in the name of the Baal Shem Tov, when he was asked about the red heifer, how does it allude to serving God at any moment?" Right? Every mitzvah in the Torah, there's a principle that he taught, that every mitzvah is always applicable. It can be used at every moment, by every person, man, woman, or child, it doesn't matter. So it's applicable to everybody at every moment, in every place, in every situation. How does it allude to serving God at any moment, following the principle taught by the Baal Shem Tov, that all the commandments are eternal in the intellectual dimension? That there's a dimension, right, of the mind where it's always applicable. The mind, this is something that's very important, that in the mind, when a person knows Torah, he knows the entire Torah. Whatever he knows, he's performing the mitzvah at that moment. The mind is different than words or actions. Because words and actions, they have a specific time and place. So if I read the 2 parshas of Shema, after Chatzos, let's say, after midday, so I'm no longer performing the mitzvah, even though I'm saying the same words. So they're limited by time, what I speak. If I daven Yom Kippur davening today, doesn't have the same value that it has when I daven it on Yom Kippur. In actions, all the more so. And actions, it's even divided, segregated into people, men and women. Some things are applicable, some things are not. They're applicable by age, whether you're old enough, you're too old maybe, all kinds of things. But in the dimension of the mind, when a person is learning, so I know this from the Torah itself, that when I learn, it's always a mitzvah. And even for a woman, even if she's not commanded to learn this particular thing, let's say, it's still a mitzvah. She's not commanded to, but it's still a mitzvah. Still gets some sachar. What?
We don't have the mitzvah of learning.
Okay, not as a chiyuv, but certainly if you do it, it's a mitzvah. Okay? So, in the dimension of the mind, it's always eternal. It always exists. So from here he says, so if you understand it in the dimension of the mind, there's always, and this is something that's very basic, it says, Lo ama aretz chasid, that a person who has no knowledge, who's an ignoramus, can't be a chassid. Because to be a chassid means that you've learned. To serve Hashem, you have to know. It's not enough to just do the actions. You can do the actions; they're also very important, the most important. But they don't have the same value that the learning does, because the learning changes how you do the action. So he says, in the dimension of the mind, changing your understanding changes how you relate to Hashem. So it's always serving Hashem. So he says, even though the commandments manifest in time and in action, nonetheless, in the intellect, they are always eternal. So when I learn Kriyas Shema, not just say it, but I learn it, and it has Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, the mitzvah of unifying Hashem. And so that's always applicable, even in the middle of the night or the middle of the day. It doesn't matter when. For the Torah is divine and divinity is eternal. As the Baal Shem Tov's disciples say in his name, that the entire Torah can be found at every moment in the dimension of wisdom and the intellectual, which means that it is possible to learn from every commandment what it refers to, meaning in serving Hashem, which is mostly in the mind, serving Hashem is how I look at the world, so it's always applicable. So he was asked about the red heifer, given that even in the time of the temple, the commandment of preparing it was performed only rarely. They only made 9 of them. Okay? As it relates in the Mishnah regarding who prepared the heifers, it says who exactly made all 9 of them. And also about the principle that it purifies. So there were only 9 made. So how do you understand this mitzvah? Bring me, meaning that Hashem says, bring to Moshe Rabbeinu a red heifer. How do you perform that at every moment? What does that teach you in serving Hashem at every moment? What does it mean to bring a red heifer at every moment? Okay. And specifically to Moshe Rabbeinu, as we'll see. Okay. So, and there's another thing, that it purifies the impure and makes impure the pure. Right? That it flips you. If you are pure, it makes you impure. If you're impure, it makes you pure. So these 2 principles, how do you prepare it all the time? And how do you take this principle, which, interestingly enough, in action is very paradoxical. When you apply this principle, that the person who's preparing the red heifer becomes impure, but the ashes are used to make somebody impure pure, so in action that's paradoxical. Because the same ingredient shouldn't act in 2 different ways. It should act always the same way. If it makes you pure, it should make you impure, or the opposite. But it can't do both. So how does it do both? But in the mind, as we'll see, the paradox is completely gone. There's no paradox at all. It makes perfect sense. But in practice, it's very difficult. It's like you would say that somehow I would add salt, and if something was bland, it would become salty. But if something was salty, it would become bland. I've never seen salt that can do that. Okay? But that's basically what this is doing. But in the mind, it's actually not a paradox at all, as we'll see. In the mind, it makes perfect sense. So he answered like this, that it is all about the matter of feeling high or superior, distinguished, or exceptional. The red heifer is about feeling exceptional. Initially, and he explained like this, initially if an individual acts improperly and is distant from God, and here improperly doesn't mean that he necessarily did something wrong. It just means that, let's say he's just sitting here doing nothing. That's improper. Why are you not doing anything? Why are you not serving Hashem in some way? So improper doesn't necessarily mean that he did something wrong. It just means that he's neutral, let's say. In Chassidus, neutral means improper. Because how can you sit here ignoring the fact that time was wasting away? So he's not doing anything, or he's not following God right now. He's distant from God. He hasn't done any act to bring him closer. The beginning of his rectification comes from feeling distinguished. A person has to feel exceptional. What does it mean to feel exceptional? Okay. The whole world stands on my shoulders, but that's really heavy. How do you say this to somebody? You're sitting in a shir with somebody who's just coming closer to Yiddishkeit, and they say something, and let's say it's not completely wrong, but it's not the biggest chiddush in the world. What do you have to say to them? Says the Baal Shem Tov. What an exceptional thing to say. You must be, if you remember, this is how Rav Ginsburg said it in Mezhibush, you must be a very high soul. You might be the Mashiach. And at first it sounds like, what are you doing? You're feeding their ego. It says about Shem Tov, it won't work any other way. Who does this today? Breslov does this very well. Lubavitchers who have Chabad houses also know how to do it. But when you're bringing somebody, who do you have to do it with? The children. You have to give the child the feeling that they're exceptional. You have a son who I watch on Facebook from time to time, and he still feels that. I expect that Shlomo said this to him all the time. He's running with it still. It's incredible. You have to say to children.
He said the world is different since you were born.
Okay. You said something now. It says this is incredible thoughts. You must be a very high soul, because only a very high soul could say this. If nobody else is willing to say it to you, you have to say it to yourself. This is what the Baal Shem Tov says. You have to learn how to say to yourself, I'm exceptional. I'm remarkable. There's something special about me. Why? Because that's the only way, he says, to begin pursuing a great deed. And we'll see in a moment what he means by doing something great. Okay, but you have to have that as the inception of every movement towards the holiness. It says the beginning of his rectification comes from feeling distinguished and not acting for its own sake and not doing something lishma. You can't do something lishma in the beginning. You have to say, I'm doing it for some reason, for some ulterior motive. Okay, what does this fly in the face of? Everybody has to say here, rectifying the ego. Said it, rectifying the ego is already when you're in trouble, when you need emergency first aid. But here, a normal person, he's in a state of just going through life, whatever it is. He's not too holy, he's not holy, he's somewhere in the middle. He's somewhere, getting by. He has to believe that he is remarkable. And even do things like we teach little children, learn and I'll give you a prize. Not for its own sake. I'm not teaching you yet to learn for its own sake, to do a mitzvah for the altruistic value in the mitzvah of doing kindness to somebody, but rather because you're going to get something out of it. What kind of thing? For instance, to feel superior or distinguished. You'll get a medal. We'll put a big medal on your on your lapel. And you're a distinguished person for doing this. You will receive acknowledgement. And also to receive the reward of the world to come, which is also a form of concealed distinction. Because even though we don't see it right now, you tell him in the end, you're going to be sitting next to Moshe Rabbeinu. You're going to be sitting in a very good place, in the Mizrach. Because he feels, remember, these are terrible words in Torah Nefesh. Can't say these words. Because he feels that God owes him a reward for his actions. This is mamish. Good?
This is like
Completely the opposite, right? The opposite of everything we've learned. Right. Okay. He says that's how you have to start. That's how a person starts coming close to Hashem. Like, I think he mentioned then, when we learned this with him in Mezhibush, I think he mentioned then when the Baal Tshuva davens for the first time, he is certain, and he was talking about himself because one time I heard him say this specifically about himself, Rav Ginsburg. So he said, when you daven for the first time, you think the sky's going to fall down. The whole world the whole cosmos is going to change. Because I'm davening now. Do you understand what it means to daven? You know what an incredible thing this is. So why? So at first, maybe it's just for a Baal Tshuva. We'll see in a moment that the Baal Shem Tov says this is for a tzaddik also. There's no difference. But we'll have to understand how to do it properly. But the idea is, and I have to say that until I read this again this year, I had lost a big part of my connection to Baal Shem Tov over the years. It just sort of washed away. And suddenly I read this again, I suddenly understood a lot of things that I think I had understood once, but I didn't remember even understanding. And suddenly a lot of things began to come back. One of the things is that we've mentioned this a few times. I've even mentioned this in the last few weeks. That he says that when you go to daven, your feeling should be like you're falling off a cliff. So I kind of think about that as like Mesiras Nefesh, like you're putting everything into the davening. But we'll see in a moment. I think that he means something completely different.
What do you mean by falling off?
It's like the act of davening is like some incredible act that is like the last act in your life. It's like I'm throwing everything into it. But we'll see in a moment that I think from here it turns out that he's saying something a little bit different and maybe even more important. So he says you have to even feel that Hashem owes you something and thinks highly of himself for having done something for the Almighty. I did something for you, Hashem. But in truth, but the truth is, what's the truth? That left to our own devices, what are we without the strength of the Creator? So how is it really possible to demand a reward? He said, you do this in the beginning, but then you have to come to the realization, what am I talking about? I did something for Hashem. If Hashem wouldn't give me life, He wouldn't give me everything I have, how could I do anything for Him? So He doesn't really owe me anything. However, even though I know this, one cannot initially come to this understanding. And if you start out with the understanding that I can do nothing for Hashem, that I am meaningless, that my actions are meaningless, then where will you find yourself? You would therefore be left outside. Chitzonius, it says. You'd be left. Chitzonius also means that maybe you even do the mitzvos. Maybe you daven, maybe you light Shabbos candles, maybe you give tzedakah, you do all these things because you're supposed to do it, but you do it b'chitzonius. Doing it b'chitzonius means that you're not in it. Because you don't think it really means anything. Because you don't think you mean anything. Because in the end you belittle everything because the truth is it really is meaningless. But you can't think that way. It's an incredible thing. You have to lie to yourself in the beginning. Not lie mamish, but you have to lift yourself up. You have to feel feelings of being distinguished, of being remarkable. Therefore, it is permissible to hold on to the need to feel distinguished and superior and to act not for its own sake. Then, from actions not for their own sake, as the sages say, one comes to act for the action's own sake. From there, once you have that feeling that everything that I'm doing is meaningful, and it's not just meaningful, as we'll see, it's going to change the course of history. Every little act that I do is me changing history. So if you feel that, then you can go to acting for the sake of the act itself. But you have to invest yourself in it. And to invest yourself, you have to feel that there is a self. And that self is built on this feeling of superiority. Of course, you can't stay that way. But you have to start that way. So he says, but then when one acts for its own sake, one has to remain pure and immaculate from any sense of distinction. To act for the sake of the act itself means that you have to subtract. Once you've done something, you have to subtract yourself. You're feeling distinguished from the act. And this we'll see in a moment why this is. He gives such an incredible example of how to do this. If a feeling of being remarkable be included in the act will be defaced. Meaning, when I'm going to act on my way, like we said, on my way I have to feel the self. I have to feel that what I'm about to do is going to change history. Once I've done it, I have to subtract myself from the whole act. The act happened by itself. This we've talked about many times. Like Shiloh Haken also. But that's a little bit different. When we talked about this, we talked about 3 types of bittul, if you remember. We gave an example of on Hanukkah candles, that when I'm going to light the candles, Hashem is walking with me hand in hand. I'm so important that Hashem has nothing else to do in the world but to come down and escort me to the Chanukiah with my candle in hand. Then when I light the candle itself, my feeling should be, so that's bittul, but it's bittul in the sense that I'm walking with Hashem, meaning I'm bittul to what Hashem wants. Then when I actually light the candle, it should be a feeling of bittul, of self-nullification, in the sense that the candle is being lit by itself. It's not really me lighting it. And then the final act of nullification is, once Hanukkah is over, we burn all the remains, with the feeling that I never did anything here. That's the ultimate self-nullification that he's talking about here, that I subtract myself. There's no remnant left of my involvement in what happened. Okay? Thus we can conclude that the feeling of being distinct and remarkable purifies the impure. What does it mean to be impure? That you're far from the Almighty. What does it mean to be far from the Almighty? Does Hashem do things that have no meaning? Of course not. If you feel that you're meaningless, then you're distant from Hashem. You can't. It's an incredible consequence, but that's what it means. That if you feel that what you're doing and what you are and your life has no consequence, then you're living distantly from Hashem. You're living far away from Hashem. Because everything that Hashem does is full of meaning. So, the feeling of being distinct and remarkable purifies the impure, those that are far from the Almighty. But, at the same time, if you retain it after the act was done, after you gave the tzedakah, and now you want the reward, meaning you're allowed to want the reward beforehand. But once you've done the act, you have to completely, what's the word? Not concede, but give up all the reward that I might have from this. And then he says, it also blemishes those that are pure. If you became pure, you just did a mitzvah, it's something meaningful, then you have to completely give up on this feeling distinct and being remarkable and being part of it. So it blemishes those that are pure, those who have already come close to God. For if in any moment of feeling distinguished mixes into them, into the acts, they will be scorned before God. or into the person, then Hashem despises this person. Because how can I and him dwell in the same place? There's only Hashem.
So it's ego, the feeling distinguished.
So feeling distinguished is the ego. But I have to use it, meaning the ego has to be under control. Okay. And now we said, maybe what does he mean? He just means little kids. So, he's a little child, and you tell him, every time that you learn a pasuk, some person in a hospital feels better. Here's a reward. Or every time you learn the pasuk, that doesn't do it for you. Okay, every time you learn pasuk, we'll give you a shekel. I'll give you 2 shekels, and so on as you get older. And then, like in the Litvish world, if you learn and you're enough of a scholar, then we'll give you an apartment, okay, and a good wife. That's how it works. It's fine. That's how it works. So you might think that it's only for little kids, right? But now he says, and this is also true by those tzaddikim who are already pure, who already conducted themselves in this manner. They too need to come close to God through superiority and lowliness. They also need gavut and shiflut. Meaning, throughout a person's life, they like to use the word dynamic, between feeling one's distinction, feeling one's superiority, feeling one's specialty, uniqueness, has to be balanced by feeling lowly. Okay? It has to. Even if you're a tzaddik.
So it's like the ego itself is klipas noga, and you can use it in a good way to start you off.
He never said the word ego because he's using superiority and lowliness. He's using like traits instead of like.
Ego wasn't a word at that time.
It also wasn't a word, but it was like there was a yesh. He used to have a yesh and then hargashata yesh. So there was a yesh, but notice nowhere here, as far as I remember, he doesn't use the word yesh. He just uses the feeling, the experience of feeling superior, feeling special, feeling unique, distinct, and so on. So it doesn't look like it's an object yet, meaning the ego is not yet an object here that he's relating to. Obviously, it's the ego theoretically that would derail this whole process, because if the ego is strong, so the person won't be able to truly give up, subtract himself from the result at the end, because the ego is already a strong object in his life. So he's got this fetish for his ego that he loves it. He can't. But if it's under control, then you can use these feelings the right way.
It's rectified.
If it's rectified. So in a certain sense, you have to be rectified to do this properly. Meaning you can't let the ego get out of hand. But he says that even in a tzaddik, even a person who's been doing this for 70 years, it's still the path. Why? Because, as we'll say in a moment, this is how we go through life with cycles of small-mindedness and high-mindedness or great-mindedness. We're constantly going through this cycle. Meaning we constantly have to lift ourselves to bring ourselves closer to Hashem, to make our lives meaningful. And yet, as much as they have meaning, we also have to subtract ourselves from them. Okay? So before we continue, I'm going to read something that I didn't have time to translate, which was, I'm late because I thought I would have time to translate this morning, but I never got to it.
So is this like the eighth of Guy?
Right. The eighth of an eighth sounds weak. Here it's like superiority, it's gavut, it's mamash. Apparently an eighth of an eighth is something that's controllable. That's the idea. But here it's much, we'll see in a moment, I think that's much more than that. Okay, so he quotes, Baal Shem Tov quoted in this respect, and that's how we learned it back then in Mezhibush. He quoted an incredible medrash that says, what did Korach see to dispute Moshe Rabbeinu? What did he see?
In the future.
So that's how we hear it a lot, right? So we say the medrash says that he thought, he saw that from him would come somebody who was equal to Moshe and Aaron. And what did he think? He thought it was him. That from him became him. Notice this, what happened. But there's another medrash that says he saw the para aduma, he saw the red heifer. That's interesting. So how does the Baal Shem Tov explain this? He says he saw that a person should feel, like the red heifer, feelings of superiority in order to do things. Meaning, what is this red heifer? The red heifer is that feeling of superiority, and then you burn it until there's nothing left.
How is it the feeling of superiority?
Because the redness, it never had carried a weight. It's always been taken care of. It's very special. There's none like it, right? You have red heifer once in the who knows how many moons is born. You can't even have two black hairs. If it has one, it makes it maybe even more special. If it has two, it already becomes not special. But it's always been olech ma'adanot. It's always been what do you call it? Spoiled, right? You're not allowed to use it for anything. It's just gets the best grass, and for 3 years in a cow's life is like an eternity. So it's probably like 30 years old, and it's never been done anything with, no work at all. And so this thing, you take it and you burn it. But you have to bring it to Moshe. So we'll see in a moment why Moshe here is important. But obviously because Moshe is nullification, right? But we'll see in a moment how that works even more strongly than just to say that Moshe is nullification, right? He's the symbol of nullification.
I'm trying to imagine how people actually did this. If there was only 9 of them, did one cow last for...
Yeah, it lasted for many hundreds of years, each one of them. Because it's all just ashes. It's a tiny bit.
So it wasn't so unique or wonderful to do it because it was common to do it.
No, it's common to take the ashes and to purify somebody.
Right.
But here we're talking about preparing the red heifer.
Mm-hmm.
The red heifer itself is a very uncommon animal. It's very rare to find a cow that's 100% red. What?
They're breeding them. Somebody's got some. Here. I think they're here.
3 years is a long time.
What's the 3
To make sure that in 3 years it doesn't have a single black hair, that's two black hairs is very difficult.
And it can't reproduce either.
And it can't reproduce. You can't use it for milk.
There was this
Okay,
case where
Keep it separate.
Anyway, you gotta keep it separate. So you bring this, so this special animal is brought to Moshe Rabbeinu, and then it's burnt totally, and it's made into ashes. It's not even brought into the base of Mikdash. It's a very interesting thing. It's such a special thing. You would think, where would you do this? In the Holy of Holies. So you know, once you get to it, it's like the most common thing in the world. Like it's just nothing, and nothing is left from it. So you take the highest thing that there was, and you bring it down to the lowest place. So that's what he's saying, that you have to feel so remarkable that you're going to change the course of history. And yet, once you're done, you have to subtract yourself from the equation. You have to subtract yourself out of the picture. You were never here. It's sort of like a time traveler. You come, you do your thing, and then you're gone, and nobody ever took a picture of you. Nobody ever knew you were there. And that's it. And you change the course of history. He says that that's what I learned from the red heifer. So Korach saw this, and he said, "I'm remarkable. How remarkable am I? At least as much as Moshe and Aaron." It's really a different way of saying how we saw that somebody would come from him that was equal to Moshe and Aaron. Why was he equal? Why was Shmuel equal to Moshe and Aaron? In his generation, he was equal to them. How was he equal? What did he do? That was his father. He went to judge.
he anointed the king.
He anointed 2 kings. He started the whole kingship in Am Yisrael. So if Moshe and Aaron made Hashem king, So Shmuel made a human being king. So this is very remarkable. But what happened? He couldn't subtract himself from the equation. He saw that what I can do is... Before we continue, I'll say something like this. A lot of people, when they hear Korach's story, they say, what was Korach angry about? That he had hit a glass ceiling. Meaning, he's a Levi. And that's it.
He rose to the level of his incompetence.
No, they say that that when you use a hierarchy to place people in positions, so they're stuck where they are. Where are they going to find meaning? Even if I give somebody the best job in the world, but I tell them, that's it. You'll never do anything more than this. That itself will put such a downer on what they're doing. So people say he couldn't stay content with just being this Nasi of the Levites. He couldn't. It wasn't enough for him. It's not enough for anybody. What do you want? Let's take another person. Aaron also reached a certain level. He's the high priest. What is Aaron remembered for? Is he remembered for being a great high priest? Nobody knows anything about what he did. We have no clue. The best things he did inside Kodesh HaKodeshim. Nobody ever saw him. What is he remembered for? He's remembered for what he did, which was not part of his duty. That he went out and he made peace between husband and wife and between two people. And because of that, we read in parashat Chukat that when he passes away, everybody mourns him for 30 days. Even Moshe Rabbeinu didn't receive that. Why? Because he said, it's true that I have a function in the world, but it doesn't end there. Why doesn't it end there? Because everything that I can do, everything, beyond the call of my duty, everything that I do is remarkable. It can be remarkable. I don't have to leave it as only the places that I've been given my position, that's where I can act. And in fact, he's better known not for his position, but for what he did voluntarily. Because when he did those things voluntarily, he followed this exact rule. He said, every time that I speak to somebody, this is going to change the course of history. But when it was over, he took no credit for it. He wasn't there. I didn't do anything. Hashem did this. That's the thing that Korach couldn't do. He couldn't subtract himself from what he saw. He said, I am a remarkable person. He saw that. I'm so remarkable that I can give birth to a person who will be equal to Moshe and Aaron. In what way? Maybe exactly like Shmuel did. Maybe that was what his function was supposed to be. Maybe he was supposed to develop leadership. Maybe he was supposed to develop kings. Moshe is a king, but he's not really a king. Maybe if Korach would have gone beyond his position, he would have developed leadership in Am Yisrael that was sorely missing. Because we see that every time that Moshe has to contend with him, there's nobody alongside with him. Nobody say anything. When he sends spies, he's happy to get two people to understand what he wants. But maybe if Korach would have done that, seeing the lack of leadership and the problem with the spies, seeing the lack of leadership everywhere, and he would have developed that, he could have been Shmuel himself. But why wasn't he Shmuel? Because he couldn't subtract himself from the equation. Meaning he said it has to be me in the end. And not my actions, but me. It has to go to me. It's all about me in the end. So it's really the same idea that he saw the paraduma, meaning he saw how remarkable a person has to feel, and yet he wasn't able to do the second act, which is to burn himself to ashes, and to say, when I'm finished, it's like I was never here. I don't need to take the credit for what was done. I can do things without needing the reward at the end. That he couldn't do. Why Moshe Rabbeinu? There's an incredible story. I wanted to translate it for you, but I didn't have time, so I'll just relate it. There's an incredible story. Everybody knows this story. It's a famous Gemara. that when I taught this Shabbos, it just hit me that the Chachamim are giving us an opposite story about Moshe Rabbeinu, like how you do this the right way. So it says that Moshe Rabbeinu, when he was on Har Sinai, he saw Hashem adding little tagin, they're called, little thorns, crowns to the letters in the Sefer Torah that he was going to give him. So he asked him, well, who is forcing you to add these little marks, these little crowns in the letters? So Hashem said to him, there's going to be a person in many generations, in some generations, and he's going to teach mountains upon mountains of laws based on each thorn, on each crown. So Moshe Rabbeinu said, I want to see this person. So Hashem lets him see him. So he goes into his base medrash, into Rabbi Akiva's base medrash, and he sits at the end of 8. Now we know why it's 8, because it's the 8th of the 8th. He was in the 8th row, in the 8th spot, apparently. And he hears Rabbi Akiva teaching these laws, and at the end of the Gemara, when he finishes teaching, his students ask him, Rebbe, how do you know this is? Where did you get this from? So what does Rabbi Akiva say? It's from Moshe Rabbeinu. Halacha leMoshe miSinai. This is halachas from Moshe. What are you telling me? Moshe just said he doesn't know what these things are. So how can Rabbi Akiva say it's from Moshe? What do we learn from this? That those thorns are the beginning of Torah Shebaal Peh. What did Moshe give us? Did he give us the Torah Shebaal Peh or Torah Shebichtav? He gave us Torah Shebichtav. But he began the Torah Shebaal Peh. And he began it thinking that even these tiny things, that are meaningless. What do they mean? You don't read it. You can't read it when you read the word. There's no meaning to those crowns. There's like little points on the letters. And yet, even though they're so meaningless, Moshe says, this is the beginning of a whole world of Torah. Me'akev al yadcha means that I'm forced to do this because I feel that even my tiniest action is going to give birth to a whole world. But Moshe Rabbeinu didn't teach this world. Hashem told him himself, this is only Rabbi Akiva is going to figure out how to do this. And yet, what does Rabbi Akiva say? I didn't do this. Moshe did this. That's exactly what it means when you subtract yourself from the equation. Moshe says he hears Hashem saying it's not you, it's Rabbi Akiva. Same as Korach. Korach hears there's a guy in a few generations, his name is going to be Shmuel, and he's going to be greater or equal to Moshe Rabbeinu and Aaron. It says Korach, that's me. Says Moshe, it's not me at all. I don't know how to do this. I can only treat the tiny points that I put on the letters as a world, but I can't do anything more than that. I don't know how to extract the whole Torah of Shebaal Peh that was developed by the Chachamim in the time of Rabbi Akiva. And yet, because he belittles himself, because he says, I didn't do anything, I just put little points on them. All the Chachamim say, you know who we got this from? We got this from Moshe Rabbeinu. Because Moshe Rabbeinu did this. Moshe Rabbeinu wrote the whole Torah Shebaal Peh. What are you talking about? He didn't write the whole Torah Shebaal Peh. It's the sign of his nullification. That's why he was able to give a Torah that's so infinite. Because he always subtracted himself from what he did. And so his actions propagated through history, and they continue to propagate in every single generation because of the amount of his self-nullification. That I'm simply not part of this. Meaning, on the one hand, his superiority. Superiority means not that I am superior, but that I'm capable of doing something that has superior value, that has infinite value. I said before that the Baal Shem Tov says when you go to daven, you should feel as if you're jumping off a cliff. So what I understand now after reading this again is that you should feel that every single letter that you say in davening, that is causing the world, the sky, the heavens to turn upside down and to fall down. That is the power that you have in your actions. It's, again, Moshe Rabbeinu is just a tag. It's just this little tiny addition of ink. And from that, look at our library. Look at the wisdom that we've developed over 3,300 years since Moshe Rabbeinu gave us the Torah. It all comes out of that. Yes, because he believed that every small act that I do, the tiniest that I do, is the beginning of infinity. Where did I get this power? Because I'm such a great being? No, because Hashem gives me that power. Every mitzvah is the power of the infinite. How do I know that it's the power of the infinite? It says that the act of a sofer, writing a Sefer Torah, is like giving birth. It's like the male member giving sperm into the female, and from that a world is born, a human being is born. Okay? It's an image, it's a metaphor. What should a person feel when he's writing? He should feel that I'm creating a world, in the same way that you create a human being. Every letter of the Torah is the power of the infinite. In the same way that when a person can give birth to another person, that's the power of the infinite. What do you feel? What does a person feels when he gives birth? Well, when a woman actually gives birth, then it's a little bit different. But during conception, what do you feel? It's all wonderful. It's all goodness. You don't feel, oh, this is a terrible thing. It's so hard. It's so this. It's so that. It's all pleasurable. It's all good. What makes it incredible? That in the end, it's a small, tiny act. That how could this possibly give birth to a human being? Have you ever seen somebody in the laboratory put one drop into something and a human being comes out? There's nothing like that. There's nothing like that in the world. So I almost didn't do anything, but I believe that a whole human being can come out of this. It's an incredible thought. How is it possible? Because Hashem, in the first mitzvah that He gave us, that's how it's explained in Chassidus, in the Derech Mitzvotecha, He gave us a natural power of the infinite. The power of the infinite is the power to create a world. So, Purvu, be fruitful and multiply, is the first mitzvah. It's Hashem giving humankind a natural sense of what it means to be creative, to have the power to be infinitely creative. The power of the infinite. Every human being knows what this is. It tells you every other mitzvah after that is another manifestation of that power. So every time you give, what the Rebbe tried to teach us is that every time that he gives 10 cents tzedakah, that 10 cents could turn the world upside down. If somebody says, there was an example we talked about on Shabbos, if you go to the bank and you ask them for a quarter as a loan, so they'll laugh at you. Because what are you going to do with a quarter and what are we going to do with a no interest on that? Neither of us is going to do anything with it. So to give you a quarter, it doesn't mean anything. Why? Because we're looking at the nominal value. How much is this worth? It's worth 25 cents. But when you give tzedakah to somebody, what are you giving them? Well, it depends. If you look at it and you look at for 25 cents,
But it's accumulated.
still.
Give honor for God.
Okay, no, shine. If I look at it as I'm giving 25 cents, it's not going to help them and it's probably not going to help me very much. But if I look at it as I'm performing a mitzvah from Hashem, if I'm manifesting the power of the infinite in this. There's so many stories about the Baal Shem Tov that he gave somebody a nickel And from that they built a fortune. Because the Baal Shem Tov believed that his nickel was worth it. Not because he's superior, but because the act is superior. Because every little thing that I do, it all depends on how I'm going to look at it. So it's not exactly that I'm superior in the sense that gavhut means that I'm a superior person. I'm a distinguished person. Rather, that if Hashem gave me mitzvos, I am capable of doing superior, distinguished, incredible, remarkable acts. But the key is, at the end, don't let that hurt you. Meaning you have to subtract yourself from the story. So Moshe Rabbeinu subtracts himself completely from the story. What does he find then? That the whole story is still about him. No matter what he tries to do, it all goes back to him. Everybody says it's all Moshe Rabbeinu. We never did anything. Everything that a scholar, that a well-versed scholar is about to will teach anew was all from Moshe Rabbeinu. We say that about everything that we do. It's all his. Why? Because he subtracted himself so perfectly from the whole story. So that's an incredible thought. So it's every act that I do. It could be a little tug, just adding a tiny bit of ink. I have to treat it like I'm creating a world. Like the Sofer treats every drop of ink he has to have in his mind. Every drop of ink that I put on the Sefer Torah. This is to give birth to a human being. This is to give birth to a whole new neshama. Something that has never been here. So even when I give, I only have a shekel to give. That's all I have. It doesn't matter at all. It's not the nominal value that counts. It's the fact that it's a mitzvah, that makes it superior, it makes it remarkable, makes it incredible. But only on the condition that I subtract myself in the end. So when a person davens, what does it mean that he should feel like he's going to fall off the cliff? It means that he is doing something that's going to cause the heavens to fall down. And when everybody looks at it and says, wow, did you just see the sky fall down? What will he say?
No. Not
me. I didn't do this. That's what, meaning he threw himself off the cliff. He's not there. It's almost like he never gets to enjoy it. Never gets to enjoy the fruits of his labor. It says Hashem, if you subtract yourself that way, you're the one who's going to be forced to acknowledge that it's you, like Moshe Rabbeinu. I always read that Medrash as saying, Chazal are trying to ascribe everything that they did to Moshe Rabbeinu. It's only hit me that it's not a story about Chazal, it's a story about Moshe. So if it's a story about Moshe, it's the counter story to Korach. And Korach, he could have been Shmuel. He could have done exactly what Shmuel did, apparently. Why didn't he? Because he couldn't subtract himself in the end from the whole story. He felt that it was all about him. Even when it wasn't about him, he felt it was about him. Okay. So because before a person can want to come close to, so I think we read this. So there is no way to come close to God if one does not feel some distinction. What this means is that there is immaturity and maturity in holiness. And we said this is also by a tzaddik. It's always true. It's always true that we go through stages of immaturity and maturity every single day, many times a day. The immaturity is, what does it mean to be immature in holiness? To feel that what you're doing is meaningless. To be mature is to see how meaningful it is. In relation to Yudbet Tammuz, there's a shir that I heard from an old tape from Rav Ginsburg. One of the first times that he was in, it was even before, it was when he was in Shuvah Yisrael, which is in Mea Shearim, when he was teaching there. So one of the first times he was teaching on Yud Beis Tammuz. And he quoted from the letter that the Friediger Rebbe wrote about how important this day was. Kiloti bilvad ga'ala. It's not only that Hashem redeemed me, redeemed everybody who calls himself by the name of Yisrael and so on, by the name of the Jewish people, who identifies as being a Jew. And right away, I won't mention who it was, somebody asked him, this is immature. What is this like? This is like a child playing in the sand and saying that, oh, look, I've just built the biggest palace that ever existed. Look at how great and grand my actions are. And so the Rav found it, he was like taken aback. He says, so what's your example of something of a great redemption? So right away he said, the founding of the state of Israel. That's great. That's tremendous. So the Rav had to answer him in some way. So he gave him an incredible answer. He said, immaturity is thinking that what you experience in life is meaningless. And that the only meaning you can get is from things that happened outside of you and the grand scale of history.
Headlines.
Okay. Looking at the paper, basically. And maturity, and when you're mature in holiness, Mamashi took this, I think he took it straight out of here. And being mature means ascribing all the meaning in the world to everything that Hashem does to you. Okay. And,
or that you do.
Okay. Okay. And in the end, you're not here. But these, again, this is what is the difference between somebody who's serving Hashem and somebody who's not? Somebody who's serving Hashem is feeling every moment that this bracha that I'm saying, the whole world hinges on. And why can't I feel that? Because I don't take it seriously. It's not because I'm not a holy person, he says. It's because my Yetzer Hara tells me that this is meaningless. How could it be meaningless? If you think it's you who's doing it, you're right, it's meaningless. But Hashem told you to do it. Are you saying that what Hashem does and says in this world is meaningless? If He told you to do it, it's the power of the infinite. Every single time you make a bracha, you're changing the course of history. So you're the immature one if you don't get that. Because what are you saying? Maturity, basically. It's when I do something that stands out and send the headlines, that's something great. But if it didn't make it into the paper, it doesn't mean anything. That's exactly immaturity, or what they call maturity in the outside world. Being a grown-up, because you can make the headlines, because people can talk about you. The Friediger Rebbe's release apparently wasn't in the New York Times. Maybe it was, but I don't think it was. It wasn't a headline. If it was somewhere in the back, if at all. Why? Because it has nothing to do with the way that the world looks at things. It's not kochiva otzmiyadi. It's Hashem's infinite power being revealed in the world. It says that's mature. To celebrate Yud Tammuz, to celebrate Yud Kislev, Yud Tammuz, these are acts not because when you think about them, yes, they changed here and they caused the Ukrainians to do this and they did this. No. It's because what Hashem wanted was done. And that is 1,000,000 times more meaningful than anything that a human being does because he wants to do it. I know that there are people who say, in the end, they're all pawns in Hashem's hands, and the creation of the state of Israel is just pawns, and they didn't know what they were doing, but really they were doing Hashem's bidding. So that's true about everything. There's great actions, small actions, it's all true. The question is, where does the person who's doing something come from? So, again, the lesson for me is that to be mature in holiness is to be able to ascribe, to identify, to feel how incredible and remarkable this act is. And that what does my evil inclination say to me? We'll see this in a second. It says to me, it's meaningless. Don't spend more than a second on the bracha because, you know what a bracha is? It's nothing. It's incredible. It wants to belittle. It tells me all the time, you're not capable. It's not saying I'm incapable. It says the whole thing is incapable. It's not just you. The whole setup here of doing this mitzvah, this is not going to change the world. It doesn't mean anything. Or if it means, it changes you a little. You're a little bit of a better person. But to believe this actually has cosmic significance, can't be. And if it does, how is it possible that you would be involved? You're not capable of such a remarkable act. That's what he wants me to believe. In contradistinction, in the other path, the sitra acha, to be immature is when a person experiences his evil inclination telling him, you are not worthy of doing such a great deed. If this is really a great deed, if giving tzedakah to this person, the 10 shekels you're giving, just the 10 shekels, the shekel, the half, if it's such a great deed that Hashem had to write it in the Torah, you wouldn't be involved. So you giving tzedakah is not real tzedakah. That's what he tells me. So I have to overcome him. So he makes the pure impure. So it's not really the ego in the sense of I'm looking for my indulgence, my self-indulgence and so on. It's to believe that if I'm part of this whole constellation of Torah being given to the Jewish people, and I'm a Jew, and I know about this, and I'm doing it right now, then the person who's doing me is enough a part of this that the whole remarkable deed will occur. And not just that it'll be small because I'm a small person. And this is an incredible thing to understand, because this really, what he's saying is, it places you at the same level as Moshe Rabbeinu. Meaning that the greatest kavanah in doing a mitzvah, the greatest kavanah that Moshe Rabbeinu had, was in the end to believe that the mitzvah is from Hashem, and that after it's complete, I'm gone. I'm not here. It was done by itself, as it were. That was his greatest kavanah. Meaning, when I put tefillin on in the morning, and Moshe Rabbeinu put tefillin on in the morning, from the point of view of doing the mitzvah, we're equal. But everybody will say, but Moshe Rabbeinu's intent was much greater than mine. So says the Baal Shem Tov, what was his intent? His intent was very simple. He 100% felt that this is Torah, that this was given from Hashem, this mitzvah. And therefore it's the power of the infinite. And at the same time, even though he's performing an infinite act, he's able to subtract himself from it at the end. Those are his two great intents. That's why you have to bring the red heifer to Moshe Rabbeinu. He's the one who teaches you how to use it the right way. With the story, so great that he can make a little line and it turns into Torah. When you think about it, it's just unbelievable. How can what did Rebbe Akiva teach? How did he learn that? Either it's a story or I don't know what it is. What are you talking about? How can you learn from? What they're trying to say is everything that they taught, everything that they learned by going over the psukim and darshaning them and thinking about them, living their whole lives, dedicating themselves to this book that Moshe Rabbeinu wrote, this gave birth to the Torah Shebaal Peh. But they all feel that it's those little additions. Why don't I say it's the nikud or that's the ta'amim? Because those don't appear in the scroll. The only thing that Moshe gave us was what appears in the scroll itself. So in the scroll there's only letters and little crowns. So those little crowns, again, Chazal, sages coming back and looking back and saying, whose is this? Who does this belong to? It's not ours. It doesn't matter that we dedicated our whole lives to learning this, and incredible intellect and prophecy was involved in everything that you want. In the end, this is all from Moshe Rabbeinu. We didn't do any of this. Why? Because Moshe Rabbeinu, when he wrote, he subtracted himself. He said, I'm not here. Therefore, he must feel remarkable in his ability to follow the path of God. You have to feel that the person who's here, faced with doing the mitzvah, is exactly the right person to do this remarkable deed. As the sages say, why was man created alone without a mate? Because he should realize that upon him alone the world stands. If he does not say this to himself, his evil inclination will tell him that he is not worthy of this deed. Therefore, he needs to feel remarkable, and remarkable specifically in his ability to follow the divine path and to come close to God. And again, the focus is not that I'm a remarkable person because I'm tall, because I'm strong, because I'm this, because I'm that, because I have all these accomplishments. Remarkable in the sense that I can do mitzvahs. That every act that I do, even when I write a letter, that can change the world. Because I'm going to express my care, my interest, my whatever it is in another person. I'm going to perform the mitzvah of Gemilut Chasadim, doing that. And it'll have an infinite impact on the world. But to walk around with that feeling, that's what it means to purify the impure. And truly this is lowliness. Sorry, did I skip something? Yeah. Okay. And truly this is lowliness. It only seems like a sense of superiority, as it battles the evil inclination who wants to seduce him to feel lowly with respect to a mitzvah. And the evil inclination wants the opposite. It wants me to feel lowly, that I'm worthless when it comes to doing a mitzvah. That I have no value. If I do a mitzvah, it's not going to be worth anything at all, because I'm not Moshe Rabbeinu. But that's exactly what I have to answer him. I should be like Moshe Rabbeinu. What did Moshe Rabbeinu feel? That every time that he did a mitzvah, this is going to change the world. Telling him that it is a mitzvah to feel lowly. So says the evil inclination. It's a mitzvah to feel lowly, so don't do anything. Again, it's not, like we said, it's even by a tzaddik, even by somebody who's going out to daven for the umpteenth time in his life. And he feels that it's just another act. It's just another thing that I'm doing. Lighting Shabbos candles, it's a mitzvah. It's one of the 7 additional mitzvahs that Chazal gave us. And we say about Hashem, Kitchan b'mitzvotav, we say about Hashem sanctified us in His mitzvahs. So, I'm going to light candles again. This is going to change something? Yes. This is going to change the whole world. Because it's the power of the infinite. It's not me, but I am I am remarkable enough to be part and parcel of this change that is going to occur. And so when you do things with that in mind, they become huge. They become infinite. They catapult through life. They catapult through history. They catapult through the world. They mamish change it. But the world isn't changed, like the Rebbe said, because we don't believe in it. Because we think that we put something in the pushka, it's another 10 cents. We don't believe that. It's not the 10 cents that's important. It's the fact that this is a mitzvah. It's called Vayigbali bo b'derechei Hashem. When I'm following the path of Hashem, my heart has to be uplifted to feel superior. And again, superior, not in the sense of I'm superior, but I am worthy of doing this mitzvah in the right way.
Is it Jewish pride, or is it really individual?
It's also by a non-Jew. Oh, is it Jewish pride? No, it's also by every individual. That's right. When we learned in Ve'el B'avodat Hashem, it was only about like Jewish pride. But here he's not talking about Jewish pride. He's talking about every single individual has to feel this.
And what about someone who's not religious? How could you give this over to them and to cultivate it? I mean, because there are many that do wonderful good deeds and chesed. Would their intention, whatever they do, have the same impact?
Start them off with one thing that they'll do because Hashem said to do it. And in that one thing, they're departing from I'm doing it because I'm a good person. Remember we talked about this, that Nefesh HaBehemit in a Jew is from the side of good. So it does many, many good things. So why is it called a Rasha? Right? The famous question from the Rebbe. It says, "Afilu Rashaim shebach melei mitzvot karimon." That even those who were Rashaim, They're full of mitzvahs like a pomegranate is full of seeds. So the Rebbe asked once, how can you call somebody who's full of so many mitzvahs a Rasha? Because the problem is he's a Rasha in his own eyes. He doesn't get it. He doesn't do it as a mitzvah. He does it, and yet and it's not just him because he's not frum. It's me. Because when I daven this morning, I daven like I'm a Rasha. Like my words have no meaning. I daven that way. I'm empty. I make myself into an empty shell. That's what a Rasha is. Reikanin Shabach it's called. They're empty. How can you say they're empty if they're full of mitzvahs like a pomegranate is full of seeds? Because they empty themselves. They see themselves that way. They don't understand the magnitude of what it means to be a Jew, not because you're so high and mighty. Because Hashem chose you to do these mitzvahs because the greatness comes from the mitzvah itself. The moment you just do one thing that way. Every day do one thing that way. Until you learn, like he says here, you have to learn, you have to get used to it, that every single thing that I'm doing is for posterity. Every single word that I'm uttering when I say a bracha, that's reverberating through the entire cosmos. And again, I'm immature if I feel that it's nothing. Meaning I don't treat holiness in the mature way. I still think of it as some kind of, it's a nice myth, but it's not something real.
And is that because, I think you said in the beginning, like it's the learning, like the learning formulates the kavanah. So even though the deed may be, like, it was a story in last week's Hamodia by Nachman Seltzer about some yeshiva friend of his, and he goes to, he's very wealthy, and he's a nice guy, and he does all these amazing things, and he surprised all his chevra because he just, he got married, he said, I'll learn from here. But throughout his life, like, he just kept making siyumim, but it ended up being his whole life. So the friend who's writing the stories talks about how one day, like, all of a sudden, he came to all his siyumim, and he saw, like a Talmid Chacham was getting built, and he talked about the learning, like the power. I think you said a sentence in the beginning, no?
That in the level of learning, the Torah is always eternal. Everything in the Torah is eternal.
But you have to get there through the learning, otherwise.
So here, it's not so much. You didn't talk here about the learning. You said when you treat it at the level of intellect, then you see the universality of the red heifer. Okay, not necessarily that. I mean, obviously you have to learn this Torah, but I'll say it another way. When you say a child is immature, so one way of saying that somebody is immature is looking at how they treat money. Let's say I have a 6-year-old child, and he takes a 100 shekel bill, and he lights it on fire just to see, like. So what would I say? I'd say that no, he's so rich that he doesn't feel. I'd say he's immature. He doesn't understand the value of what he's doing, what he's destroying. So that's true in monetary, in the monetary realm. It's also true in the kedusha realm, same way. That if a person has a mitzvah in his hand, and he just throws it out, it's like nothing. Like I said, I have to say Yashrei now, so I'll say Yashrei. I have to make a bracha. I'll say a bracha. Half-winded, half the words are cut off. So what are you saying? It's a little kid who's taking 100 shekels and burning it. Doesn't know what he's doing. But if every word here is meaningful to me, so that's seriousness, that's maturity. Okay, and the other side, the Tuma wants me to think exactly the opposite. He wants to make everything important except for this. This is immaturity is you're not worthy of doing anything great. Even if he concedes that a mitzvah is a great thing, but then he says, "But you're not. You can't be part of something great." Hashem, that's exactly the problem that I have of subtracting myself from the story. Because in the end, even Moshe Rabbeinu is subtracted from the story. It doesn't matter how great you are. In the end, it's all Hashem. So to subtract yourself is just if you can't subtract yourself, he says, really, what does that indicate? That you only hold from yourself very much. Because you don't want to subtract from yourself. It's not real lowliness. You don't really feel that you're low. You just say, I can't give myself up in the end. That's really what you're saying. So after I learned this on Shabbos, I mamish felt that I have to redo all my avodas Hashem. How can I continue davening the same way? I'm missing it. I'm missing the whole thing. I'm letting it slip by, saying that this really has no value. So I rethought, for instance, the letter that we've talked about so many times from the Baal Shem Tov, where he says that when a person davens, he should have in mind that worlds elevate, and souls connect, and divinity rises. That's how he says there. עולמות עולים ונשמות מתחברות, מתקשרות, and אלוקות עולה, and divinity goes up.
So the worlds go up and divinity goes up.
So they're a little bit different, but he uses different words.
What's the difference?
עולמות עולים and אלוקות מתייחדת, I think he says. It becomes one, unites. So suddenly it hit me that that's what Reb Nachman says when he says when you daven, you should go out to the field and feel that everything is davening with you. Suddenly I saw that Reb Nachman is just repeating what the Baal Shem Tov said in that letter, except that he says go out into the field and then it's just worlds. But if you also understand souls and divinity, so it's like that every word that you utter in davening, the entire cosmos is coming together into that word. That's what the Baal Shem Tov is trying to get us to feel. So it's almost like the same teaching. It's all about gavhut. It's to feel that what I'm doing now is superior. It's remarkable. Again, not because I am, but because the act is. And that I'm also worthy of it. I'm able to take part in this act.
Is that just sort of an all consciousness that you go into the tefillah, or is that a consciousness that you hold with each word? It's two different things.
So it depends on the time, I guess. How much time you have. So, yeah. And then at the end of the davening, it's as if you threw yourself off a cliff. You're not here. You never did this. So if you're as excited about this as I am, then
So you've been teaching all these years, but you haven't really been connected to the Baal Shem Tov, even though this whole thing is supposedly based on it, and
apparently not.
that's good to know.
Okay.
It's good that you know. I mean, it's good because thank you. It's very helpful.
So and it's to beware of shiftless in the wrong situation. Because there's so much we
That we've talked about a lot of times. But to understand I think about everything we've talked in the past. But somehow this time it hit me much.
Too much shiftless can be a bad thing.
Not just too much shiftless, but again, the feeling that this is a remarkable act that changes the world. To feel that you're capable of a great deed. Because it is a great deed. Because of what you're doing is great. Again, right away I had the feeling of I have to go out and find somebody to give tzedakah to. And I want to see if they're going to make $1 million from it. Like right away there was like this feeling.
Would you say that it's tricky?
Obviously you can that's why right away like it turned into let me see what I can do. It's like somebody gave me a Ferrari, let's see how fast it goes. Because I'm not subtracting myself from the equation in the end. But that thing about Korach and his not getting that point about that it's Shmuel. If you would have just felt that it's in the future, it would have been exactly like Moshe. You would have done it yourself. Or at least Shmuel would have said, you know who's anointing you now? It's a pasuk that's missing from the Navi. Okay? My great-great-grandfather, he's anointing you. I didn't do anything. He wouldn't have said, Ushmuel b'korei shmo. He said, Korach b'korei shmo. Everything would have been different. Because everybody would have attributed it to Korach.
Do you think if Rashi had come into the Rebbe's Rashi Sikha, he would have a similar feeling?
I'm convinced. I'm convinced because I've done so much with the Rebbe's Sikhas and Rashi that there is no way in the world that Rashi could have meant all that. It's just impossible. You see it. And yet the Rebbe is convinced 100% that this is Rashi. But it's not Rashi, it's written in Rashi. After the Rebbe explains it, of course it's there. But did Rashi have this in mind? I can't believe it. But he did something, he wrote it. So he wrote with such a feeling of shiftless. It's a great thing to write Torah. It's the Torah that's the great thing. That after 1,000 years, this great giant stands up and he says, everything that I just learned, I learned from Rashi. But you see that he doesn't learn it from Rashi. You see that he takes it from others, but still it's all from Rashi. Okay, it's a beautiful example of how it works today. Okay. So,